The next Arctic crisis will not start with a missile. It will start with an accident, a collision, a spill, a rescue, a misread radar contact, then panic, blame, and escalation. Because when the Arctic turns into a corridor, it turns into a risk engine. Let's talk about what people miss when they talk about the Arctic. They treat it, in fact, like a map problem, like a new line between Asia and Europe, like a technical issue, ice ships season. But in geopolitics, the real question is who gains and who loses leverage and what are the risks created on the way. Because as the Arctic becomes unstable, it becomes more than geography. It becomes an economic system, a security system, and a crisis system. A corridor doesn't just shorten distance, it changes the hierarchy of ports, routes, and gatekeepers. And if the Arctic route becomes reliable for meaningful parts of the year, the trade map inside Europe, Asia, North America can change. Northern European ports and North Atlantic logistics nodes gain gravity, while the Mediterranean ports could face a painful reality. Traffic may bypass them. And with that, economic strength will go, which will mean new crises in North Africa and the Middle East. Here's the part that separates fantasy from reality. Shipping isn't geometry. Shipping is risk. So the winners aren't automatically the ones closest to the route. The winners are those who can make the route reliable. This means escort capacity on ice, search and rescue capability, good maps and reliable navigation support, ports that can refuel, and rules, especially insurance and safety standards. Because if insurance treats the route as unstable, expensive, or politically risky, the shortcut is only theoretical. This is how leverage shifts quietly, not with flags, with systems. Now we get to the dangerous part. As the Arctic becomes a corridor, the number of moving parts explodes. More commercial ships, more drilling and mining, more infrastructure, more military patrols and sensors. More moving parts means more accidents. And in the Arctic, accidents are amplified. Distances are brutal, weather is punishing, response windows are short. So the crisis path looks like this. A ship grounds or two vessels collide. Or there's a spill, a rescue going wrong. Then the political layer hits. Who responds first? Who has the right to operate there? Who gets blamed? Who uses that moment to justify a permanent presence? That's how escalation happens without intention. Not because leaders plan war, but because the system manufactures pressure faster than diplomacy can absorb it. Now, add the second big driver, the ground itself, which is changing. Permafrost thaw destabilizes what sits on top of it, roads, buildings, pipelines, and that includes strategic infrastructure. That creates a nasty paradox. States race to build the Arctic capability in a region where the physical foundations are becoming less reliable. So you get higher costs, constant repairs, and sudden failures. And in geopolitics, maintenance failure is never only about maintenance. A runway that can't take aircraft is a security problem. A damaged fuel depot is a crisis. A pipeline rupture is an environmental disaster and a political blunder. Yes, resources are parts of the race, energy, minerals, supply chains. But here's the trap. The Arctic is opening partly because warming reduces barriers. Then states and companies rush to monetize the opening through shipping, drilling, mining infrastructure, raising ecological and accident risks. So you can win access and still lose stability, and precisely this, being able to guarantee stability, is the real currency. There's also another layer most people ignore, the seabed. Modern economies don't only run on ships, they run on undersea infrastructure, especially data cables. In remote, harsh environments, monitoring is difficult, attribution is hard, and gray zone pressure becomes tempting. When disruption is easy and blame is murky, deterrence gets messy. Just look at the sabotage of the Nord Stream underwater gas pipeline. One more point that's not soft is strategic. Local and indigenous agency isn't a footnote. It determines whether projects last or whether they become politically fragile and easy to disrupt. Fragile projects don't create durable power, they create liabilities. So here's what the Arctic opening is really about. A corridor that shifts leverage and economic gravity, potentially away from the Mediterranean and towards the north. A corridor that multiplies accidents. A corridor where infrastructure is expensive and vulnerable. A corridor that creates a new gray zone temptations. And that leaves the world with a choice. Build basic rules that prevent accidents from turning into crises, or drift into Arctic roulette, where the first major accident decides the next decade for everyone. Because in geopolitics, the biggest shifts rarely arrive with an announcement. They arrive when the route becomes normal, and normal is where power quietly locks in. Who holds the keys for these locks is now the biggest issue in the new Arctic race.